Welcome back to my home kitchen. Today's big little recipe is a super easy tomato dish. We only need 2 ingredients, and one of those obviously is tomatoes. So the weight is gonna depend on the variety. I have beefsteak tomatoes here. You're gonna be going for about 1 pound overall. That might be 2 like really big tomatoes. Maybe it's 3 slightly smaller ones. This is a little bit over 1 pound, totally okay. This is a super flexible recipe. You don't have to obsess over any measurements. So, pound of tomatoes, and our other ingredient is cheddar cheese. So I have a sharp white cheddar here. I'm curious to know what you guys usually have in your fridge. This is my default. Do you usually keep sharp or mild, yellow or white? Let me know in the comments because I'm curious to see what's your norm. This is mine. Really, any cheddar will work here, so just use whatever you have in the fridge. We're gonna need 3 ounces, which you could weigh out on a scale, but if you have an 8-ounce block, a really easy way to figure that out is to score it. So if this is 8 ounces, I know that in half is going to be 4, right? And then I cut it in half again, and then each of those are 2, cut it in half again, 2 plus 1. So that's, in theory, 3 ounces. Because this is such a flexible recipe, if it's leaning a little bit over or under, totally does not matter. I would say when in doubt, go over because more cheese is better than less cheese, right? Oh,
2.8.
okay. I'm gonna cut a tiny sliver more cheese. This way no tomato gets shortchanged. Okay, well now I'm over, so it's all fine. So we have our cheddar measured out, and now we are just gonna grate it. So I am using the coarse holes on my box grater. You really probably could use the fine ones too. I like the coarse just because I find it a little bit easier to grate. Just gonna do the bigger block. And with the smaller block that I cut out just to get a little bit extra cheese, I'll just probably throw that in whole. I wouldn't wanna try to put my fingers this close to the grater. End of my cheese started to crumble a bit. Totally fine. I just kind of like, I'll break that up with my fingers. And then that way, when it gets in the pan, it's like more or less the same size as the grated cheese. And then it'll melt on the tomatoes. So we got our pile of grated cheese. The only other prep task that we have is cutting these tomatoes. So I just like take off their stems and then I'll give them a quick wash. And then we are going to chop them into wedges. Like the cheese amount, the size of the wedge here doesn't really matter that much. Also depends on the size of your tomatoes, right? But basically we are just going to be searing them in a skillet until they start to soften and brown. If you have wedges that are a little bit bigger, you might take a little bit more time. If they're smaller, it might take less time. Just kind of do it by sight, right? This is the 4th time I've tried the same tomato. Okay, all right, our tomatoes are dried off. So now I'm going to cut them into wedges. So I'm just going to halve it. Then I will have each half, and then I will have each of those as well. So I'm just gonna do 1/8 for the size tomato that I have. That's like 1 inch, I guess. Yeah. Perfect, okay. I know for these size tomatoes now I'll just do them all in 1/8, so they're roughly even sized. So I have a cast iron skillet here. I'm gonna turn the heat onto medium. Then drizzle in like a tablespoon of olive oil. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. Do you think that was a tablespoon?
I think it was exactly a tablespoon.
So once the pan and the oil are hot, we are going to add our tomato wedges, shake them out, and then let them cook for like 3 minutes. So I'm just gonna grab my timer. Do you think it's ready? Oh, okay, wait, we know how. Yeah.
Feels really hot.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so I'm just gonna like throw them all in. And now that they're in, I'm just like shaking the skillet. Ideally, they'll be in a even layer. If they're not, you can just kind of like overlap a few of them. And now we're gonna sprinkle them very generously with salt and pepper. And then we'll let these go for like 3 minutes. These have been cooking for like about 1.5 minutes. At this point, I'm just going to rotate the skillet. So if there's any like unevenness on your stove, in your skillet, which there probably is, that's a nice way to make sure that the tomatoes are cooking evenly. So we don't want to shuffle them around at this point because we're trying to get their bottoms to brown. So by moving the skillet, that encourages evenness while they're still searing and getting that like nice golden crust. So I just shuffled around our tomatoes. Just gonna shake the pan. And at this point, we add our cheese. Okay, so this will take just a few seconds to melt. And in that time, you could click our subscribe button so you can see more recipes, videos just like this. Okay, it's still melting. You can still click subscribe. I am going to cut the heat because most of our cheese is good to go. Just like with anything else, the heat doesn't need to be on for the tomatoes to be cooking, for the cheese to be melting. So all this residual heat here, that like super hot cast iron pan, it's gonna take care of melting the rest. We don't wanna take it too far because then it might separate. You want it to still be like gooey and but saucy, right? Our melty cheddar tomatoes, they are still sizzling. They look so good. I have a couple slices of bread here, totally optional, highly recommended. I like to just serve up some of the tomatoes and then just like swoosh the bread through all that like tomatoey cheesy sauce. So I am just going to serve some up. I'm gonna put my bread here and swoosh that through that. I'm also just like probably gonna go right into the skillet because none of that sauce should go to waste. These are our 2-ingredient melty cheddar tomatoes. To find the full recipe, you can head to Food 52. To see more videos like this, like the video, let me know in the comments what you wanna see, and I'll talk to you next time.